everybody. Happy Wednesday. Hope everyone is doing well wherever you are out there in the wilds of the internet today. We had a great day here at the Beading Dreams. We were nice and busy, which is always happy making for us. And now I get to teach you a tutorial, which is also super fun. So thanks for joining us for our Wednesday evening tutorial, coiled wire chandelier earrings. And that project looks like this. This is actually a project that I kind of knocked together. Okay, are you kidding me? Nope. So anyway, this is a project that I kind of knocked together because a client needed, a very nice client, but she needed earrings for her daughter for sorority rush, and this apparently, I've never been a sorority person, but apparently this is a huge deal, and so she needed something special, so I knocked together this project for her, and it's actually become, oh goodness, what is going on with that? Okay. So anyway, yeah, and it's actually become one of my favorite chandelier earring projects because it's pretty simple. The coiling gives it a lot of kind of intricacy, and it still goes together in not a terribly long period of time. So let's talk tools and supplies for this evening's tutorial. You are going to need wire, and so I got 2 gauges of wire. I've got some 22 gauge and some 26 gauge, and I'm using gold filled tonight. You could also use 20 gauge instead of 22 if that's what you happen to have. And then you're going to need 2 beads. They don't have to be square or rectangular. I'm going to use these square labradorites, but you could use oval. You could really use any shape of bead. But the most important thing with this particular bead in the project is it has to be center drilled. Okay, so it's got to have a hole going all the way through one axis of the bead. It can't be top drilled. It can't be a teardrop. And then you're going to need 3 beads for the bottom of each earring. So I have chosen a labradorite and 2 pearls. That's what I'm going to use for that. And then you're going to need, depending on whether you choose all top drilled or all center drilled, you're going to need some head pins. So you're going to need basically 1 head pin for each center drilled bead you've chosen, not counting the big ones. Alright, so I've got 4 pearls, so I've got 4 head pins. The pearls are center drilled. The labradorites are top drilled, so I'm going to do those with the 26 gauge wire. And then of course we need ear wires, since we are trying to make a functional pair of earrings. So I'm going to start with my 22 gauge wire, and I'm going to cut myself a piece of that. It doesn't have to be super long. Basically, I'm looking for enough wire to go completely around this bead, make a loop at the top, and make 3 loops at the bottom. So basically, if I double the kind of, perimeter of this bead, then I should be good to go. So this bead's about 1/2 inch per side, so that means it's 2 inches total around, 4 inches. I'm a paranoid person about wire, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut 2 6-inch pieces of wire. So that means I'm using a foot of 22 gauge wire total. And then I'm going to cut my 26 gauge wire as well. Typically when you're doing any coiling project, you're going to use 3 times as much of your coiling wire as you will use of your core wire. So I've got 6 inches of my 22 gauge. I'm going to cut 18 inches of my 26 gauge. And that's just kind of a rule of thumb. It has to do with, pi and circles and all of that sort of thing. So generally 3 times the length of your coiling wire, 3 times the length of your core wire is what you will cut your coiling wire. Sorry, that syntax apparently is escaping me today. All right, awesome. So I've got 2 pieces of 26 gauge that are 18 inches each, 2 pieces of 22 gauge that are 6 inches each, and a camera that apparently does not give a crap about me. Focus, thank you. I'll cut your salary, camera. Of course, the camera is technically a slave because I purchased it, and I do not pay it, you know, compensatory wages, so I guess threatening to cut its salary really isn't an effective threat. But anyway. Okay, I'm just straightening out my wire, my 22 gauge wire a little bit, just because I want it to be not quite as kinky as it was coming off of the spool. Alright, now we're going to begin. As far as tools go, by the way, you're just going to need your basic wire wrapping set. So you're going to need your round nose pliers, you're going to need your chain nose pliers, and you are going to need a wire cutter as well. And with those 3, we're going to be able to make this entire project. So I'm going to start with one of my pieces of 22 gauge wire. I'm going to put everything else kind of to the side. Hopefully it won't fall on the floor. And I'm going to start by making a loop in the bottom of my 22 gauge wire. So I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm just going to grab at the very end of my wire and I'm going to roll around. And when I get to the point where I can't roll anymore, because think of it as soft focus, right? It's a filter. It's totally a filter. When I can't roll any further, I'm just going to loosen my pliers, rotate them back, and continue to roll until I have a closed loop like so. And then I'm going to center that loop up by grabbing at the base and just bending it back like so, so that I have a loop that's centered. Now I have a loop that's centered over the central axis of my wire. Then I'm going to go ahead and drop one of my labradorite beads onto that wire. Now I'm going to make at the top of my bead a basic wire wrap loop. So I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm going to grab so that they're touching the top of that bead, like so, and then I'm going to take my left hand. I'm a right-handed person, so my pliers are my right hand, so my left hand is my non-plier hand, so I'm going to push my wire away from me over my pliers to make a 90-degree angle. Then I'm going to loosen my pliers, rotate them an 1/8 of a turn approximately, and grab right on that corner I just created. Bring my wire back up over the top of my pliers towards me and down. So now I've started to make a loop around those pliers. I can't finish it though because this part of my pliers right here is in the way. So I'm going to loosen, rotate, grab, and go underneath to make my lady with a scarf. Now I'm going to switch to my chain nose pliers and I'm going to hold across my loop with my chain nose and I'm going to wrap that wire. So I'm going to start at the base of my loop and I'm going to wrap down until I reach my bead. Now at this point, if you were doing just a simple wire wrapped earring, you would cut this wire off. Don't do that. Do not. Keep your hands away from the wire cutters, everybody. Anyone who is reaching for a wire cutter, just stop. I'm sorry, but you don't need it for this right now, later. Because this is our core wire. This is the wire now that we're going to start coiling around to make our coiled wire chandelier earrings. So I'm going to go now to the end of my wire and I'm going to grab my 26 gauge wire and I'm going to take my 26 gauge wire and I'm going to hold it crossways to my 22 gauge wire. Okay, so this is my 22, this is my 26. Notice I've given myself a decent amount of wire to hold. Okay, do yourself a favor, don't try to do this. It's really, really difficult and is going to just wind up basically with you hating me and life. Ooh, a wire and everything else on the planet. So give yourself plenty to hold on to. So now I'm going to start coiling with my dominant hand. So again, this is my right hand, this is my left hand. So my left hand is holding, my right hand is coiling, and I'm just going to start coiling that wire. You don't want any airspace between your wire and your coils. You want them to be really tight against each other. Now, as you can see, I'm coming up to the end of my wire, so all I need to do to keep going is I just need to scoot that down a little bit. It's way easier to coil out here at the end of the wire because you've got a lot more room to move your coiling hand. You don't have to manipulate around that wire as much. You can just kind of circle around the outside of it pretty easily. So we're not going to be able to do this for the entirety of this project, but whenever we can, it's a great idea to come and coil out at the end of the wire because, okay, so see what I just did? I just overlapped my coil. That's not what we want. So I'm going to unwrap it, rewrap it so that it is next to the coil that precedes it instead of on top of it. So my goal here is I want to make enough coil to go here, down this side, and just right to this corner, and that's where I'm going to make my first loop. So I think I still have a bit to go. Alright, so we're going to see how that goes. So once I think I have enough coil, I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, see all this? That's the beginning basically of my coil that's not very pretty. I'm going to trim that off and just remove it. And then I'm going to take that coil and I'm going to slide it all the way down until it hits my wire wrap. And then we're going to just form that around our bead. Okay, and I actually went a little too far because if I fold this over, it's going to go all the way to here, and I don't want that. I want it to be right at the corner, which is totally fine. I'm just going to uncoil a bit. I'm going to uncoil about that much. Okay, that's better. Okay, so then we're going to bend this around. So I'm starting to frame my bead. So now I'm going to make my first loop that I'm going to use to hang my dangling beads off of. So I'm just going to take my round nose pliers and just hold right at that corner and rotate my wire up and around my pliers to make a loop. Chances are your loop is going to be pretty wide like mine is, so you can then go in with your chain nose and just sort of press that down flat. Now I need to keep coiling here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my wire, I'm going to continue coiling in the same direction. Took me a second to figure out what direction that was, of course, and just kind of skip over that loop. And then keep coiling along this line here. Now we don't have to coil for very long because it's not going to be very long till we get to that center loop, so I'm guessing maybe 8-9 coils tops. So let's see if I'm right. Now if it gets awkward having your bead in the way, you can just bend everything sort of out of the way of your bead. Like I said, it's significantly more awkward when you're not out at the edge. If your coils are starting to spread a little bit like mine are, you can take your chain nose and you can just give them a squeeze to get them back together. Okay, so 7 coils, actually, it turns out, is the magic number. Now, this is the beginning of my wire. This is that loop that I made at the very start of the tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn that loop sideways, and I'm going to take my 22 gauge wire, I'm going to thread it through that loop. What this is going to do is it's going to help hold my wire to my bead. So pull your wire nice and tight, okay, because you want a nice tight frame. And then once again, and this is the one part of this project where I kind of wish I had an extra hand, because you really need to hold this tight. If you let it go, it's going to want to spring out and do that, so hold that tight against that wire. And then take your 26 gauge and just wrap it around that loop and then around your 22 gauge to secure it. And once you've done that, then you don't have to hold like crazy anymore. Now we're going to wrap until we get back to that corner, so that's another 7 wraps, or should be since my bead is roughly symmetrical. Okay, so 7 more coils, and then make a loop. Loop happens with your round nose, like so. So you want it to be roughly in the same position as the loop you did before. And then once again, just keep coiling in the same direction, skip the loop. And now we're going to go back up and over. So this is a long, kind of straight series of coiling. And you can use your thumbnail if your nails are strong enough to kind of help you get that coil in place. This is what you want to be wary of. See how kind of messy and overlapping that is? That's not your ideal coiling. That's what happens when you're trying to look at your coiling on a computer screen instead of actually look at it. So just uncoiled that, and I'm getting it back in proper form. So now I'm just going to coil for a minute. Once again, you can squish your coils together. Okay, so this is what I've got so far. I still need to go a little bit further. I know coiling projects are super interesting, aren't they? In the interim bits where it's just watching someone wind one wire around another wire. Okay, I'm getting close to the end of this. Bit more. Okay, so there we go. I've made it. So now I can trim off the rest of my 26 gauge wire. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to save that scrap though because I can use it to wrap my teardrops. Make sure that any pokey, stabby ends that you might have get pressed in. And then I'm just going to take that 22 gauge wire, I'm going to anchor it around the loop. Just 1.5 times is sufficient. Trim that off and press that in. Alright, so there is my base. Now the reason that this loop is so far over to the side here is because I wasn't really paying attention when I picked my stones. They're not drilled straight, so I'm going to just make that something that I'm going to decide not to care about. But that's why the top is here and then the bottom is here, because that hole actually goes diagonally through the stone. Not, I think, on purpose, but just because that is how it does. Alright, so now I'm going to real quick run through the second one. There it is. So this is going to be the quicker version of this. So I'm going to take my 22 gauge wire, the second piece that I cut, and make myself a loop. I'm going to center it. I'm going to drop my next labradorite, which is not drilled quite so crooked. On there. And I'm going to make my basic wire wrap loop. So there's my lady with a scarf, hold across my loop, and wrap down until I reach my bead. Okay, now I'm going to start my coiling, which means I'm going to grab my other piece of 26 gauge wire. And we're going to start here at the end. Holding the two wires crosswise. And we're going to start coiling. So while I'm doing this, so last week I promised you all a white tie sale for the debut of our new merchandise, and unfortunately I have lost my tiara. So we're bumping the white tie sale to Saturday in hopes that whatever cat stole my tiara will return it to me, and tonight's going to be a business casual sale featuring 8-inch gemstone strands, and I am going to give you just a little bit of new merchandise tonight of individual beads, but we're going to be focusing on 8-inch gemstone strands tonight, and it will be white tie and tails and tiaras on Saturday. So for anybody who is hoping to see us in tiaras tonight, I'm so sorry, but yeah, like I said, mine's gone on walkabout. Personally, I think Ziggy has it. But it could be Mamie. Okay, so I'm just continuing to coil. Again, my goal here is to coil. I have to go there, there, and just barely round the corner. And once I think I've got enough, hi Corvus, how are you? I can trim off the part that's not so pretty and just get rid of that. It is a lab, and it's a flashy one too. It says hi Corvus, winking at you. Alright, so now I'm going to pull this down till it hits my stone. And then I'm going to bend it around the outside And once again, I coiled too much. So again, I just want it to go to the corner, so I'm going to back it up like 6 or 7 coils. How's everything in the land of not being in school anymore, Corvus? I swear, when I graduated college, like, of course I had to get a job and everything because, you know, needed to pay for a place to live and whatnot. But I swear to God, I think I slept for like 4 days straight. One day for each year. Getting boiled alive by the sun. Yeah, that could be said of Texas as well. So now I'm going to make my loop. Yeah, on Sunday it was 108 degrees. Not fun. We are definitely not going to have a mild summer. Okay, so now I've got my loop made. I'm just going to keep coiling in the same direction. I'm just going to skip around that loop like so and just keep going. Yeah, and also windy. Oh my gosh. So we were supposed to have the white tie sale tonight, which has been postponed till Saturday because I have lost my tiara and I need to interrogate Ziggy to figure out where he put it. But my hair, when I left the house this morning, I had this really cute like 1920s finger wave thing going, and by the time I got here with the wind and everything, it had transformed from like 1920s to 1980s. I was like, okay, well now I look like, you know, Tiffany. Okay.
It rocked you like a hurricane?
It rocked me like a hairdryer cane, if there's such a thing. Okay, so now I'm going to put it through this loop here. It definitely gave me hairband hair. I think one of the funniest, and I don't even remember what hairband it was, but there was an interview with one of the hairbands from the 80s, and they were talking about like the different volumes of hair that were necessary for each venue. It was like there was, you know, like pub hair, and then there was, you know, concert hall hair, and then there was stadium hair. You saw it? It's on the internet. Somebody could clip it if they wanted to.
Well, I didn't see it because I'm over here. It hasn't played.
Just give it a minute. Alright, another loop. Corvus,
There it is.
Corvus, were you even born in the 80s?
No, not even kind of.
So,
She was barely born in the 90s.
I mean, to be fair, I was a child in the 80s, so I only experienced the tail end of the 80s as someone who is really aware of things like hairbands and stadium hair. But still, it was close enough to me, you know, chronologically that there was some spillover of the 80s into the early 90s. So I'm on my home stretch of coiling here to go up the other side and then anchor around that loop. So yeah, so we've got our we've got our business casual sale, and this evening at 7:30 that's going to be 8-inch strands, and then the white tie awesome new merchandise sale will be Saturday at 7:30, I will be putting a little bit of new merchandise on the stream tonight, though, just for fun. Second or third job in the 80s. Okay, well, hi, Sharon.
I mean, I had a job in the 80s. It was dusting. That was my job.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean...
And when I was bad, it was cleaning toilets.
Yeah, my chores were vacuuming the stairs, which I hate to this day, cleaning the bathroom, and folding the laundry. Those are my chores. So Kenneth had a valid point of when he makes coils on 20 or 22 gauge wire, he winds up bending the heck out of the core wire, which is not uncommon. And he's considering using half hard wire as the core. So there are pluses and minuses to that. The plus being you're not going to bend the heck out of it, but the minus being it's going to be hard, no pun intended, to get it to form nicely around your object. So it's definitely worth a try, but just, you know, when I'm doing my coiling around my wire, I try not to touch it. I'm holding it very close to the point at which I'm coiling. The further away you coil, the more you're going to be messing with this base wire when you're doing your coils. So I keep holding very close to where I'm coiling, and I'm trying not to touch my core wire at all. So you might want to try that little adjustment to your technique before you try the half hard wire. It kind of also depends on just how sculptural you're wanting to get with your things. Like if you're just making a square like this project, then you should be able to do that in half hard wire, no problem. But if you're doing one of those really intricate wire wraps where you're coiling and you're weaving and you're, you know, hugging the stone, then half hard wire isn't necessarily going to be your friend in that situation. Okay, so I've got my 26 gauge wire here. I'm going to chop off the rest of it. And press down your pointy stabby. And then we're going to take that and we're going to anchor it off on this wire wrap, and just 1.5 times around is sufficient. Now, sometimes this happens. See how this is so much higher than that? I do not like that. Do not like it, Sam, I am. So when it wants to do that, what I'll do is I'll actually take this and thread it underneath, and then use my pliers to yank it through. It's a little bit more difficult, but see how it gives you a nicer line. And it still kind of looks like a heart, but we'll forgive it for that. So I anchored it around 1.5 times, and then I'm going to trim and press in my pokey stabby. What the heck it is.
Copyright technical term.
Right? There, now it looks less like heart. Okay, so then these are my two components for my chandelier earrings. Doesn't necessarily have to be a chandelier earring component if you're not a chandelier earring person. You could totally do this as the centerpiece of a rosary or a Y-style necklace. Just use it this way, and you've got it's a 2-to-1 connector basically. If you have a multi-strand necklace that you need places, you know, to crimp off, you could do 2 strands. You can also use this one, which we are going to do for our dangles. You could do 3 strands and then attach your clasp there. So there are a lot of applications for this that aren't just earrings. But since the class is called Coiled Wire Chandelier Earrings, that is what we shall do tonight. Okay, so now I've got my components done, and I'm going to work on wire wrapping all of my little dangling parts. So start with my teardrops, and I'm going to do that with some of my leftover 26 gauge wire. So to do a top drill, that lab is still winking at you, Corvus. Just saying. I'm going to go through the top of that teardrop, and I want a short side of wire and a long side of wire. So my short side is going to be about 1 inch or so, my long side is going to be the entire rest of the wire, and I'm going to bend my wire up against the holes of my bead, like so, to make an X. And I want the point of that X triangle to be right above the point of my bead. Now I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab the long wire right above the point where those two wires cross and bend it straight up. So now what I've done is I've taken my long wire, centered it up over the central axis of my teardrop. Then I'm going to take my short wire and I'm going to wrap it around my long wire 1.5 times. And I'm just doing that with my fingers. That's the easiest way for me, because it's really difficult to get your pliers into that little spot because there really just isn't any room. Okay, so 1.5 times. And then trim. Press down your pointy stabby. Alright, and now we're going to make a basic wire wrap loop. So when you're doing teardrops, it's a two-part process. You do the teardrop part first. That gives you essentially a bead on a stick. Then you do a basic wire wrap loop, which we're going to use to attach it to our earring. So that, if you remember from earlier, goes away, rotate, back up over the top, rotate underneath to make our lady with a scarf, like so. And then I'm going to grab one of my chandelier components and I'm going to use this middle loop, because that's what my labradorite is going to be, is my middle component. So I'm going to just thread that wire through that loop and try and keep it on the same side. Hey. Okay, this was not supposed to be the difficult part of the project. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to thread that through that loop and just feed it all the way up until my two loops are interconnected. Then I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and just wrap my 26 gauge wire around down until I meet the end that's already there. And trim. Press down. Make sure it's facing front. And there we go. There's one loop added onto my component. Now I'm going to do the same with my other labradorite. And you can, like I said, you can use teardrops for all three of these. You can use center drilled for all three of these. There's really no right or wrong as far as that goes. So short side and a long side. Hi, Sophia. Bend your pieces up to make a triangle. You want the point of that triangle to be directly above the point of the bead, and bend up and wrap around 1.5 times. Itchy nose. And then trim. And press that stabby end down. Okay, now we make a basic wire wrap loop on top of that. More wire rings, Corvus. I will take that under advisement. Though we do have a ring, we've got our noon tutorial tomorrow is our Ray of Sunshine ring. So we do have one tomorrow, but I will try and remember to put some more on in future weeks. Alright, so now I've got my two loops interlocked. Hold across my loop with my chain nose and wrap. Trim. Okay, so now I've got labradorite on each of these. Now I'm going to switch to my head pins and my pearls. So if you're doing head pin wrap, you can you skip the first part and just go straight to the basic wire wrap loop. So drop your pearl or whatever bead you're using onto your head pin, and then again, away, rotate, back up over the top, rotate underneath, like so. It's Our Lady with the scarf. Link it onto one of my loops. And hold across that loop with your chain nose and wrap, starting at the base of the loop down to your bead. Trim and tuck. So you've got a nice end like that, and then we're going to repeat. So pearl goes on the head pin, and then you start with your round nose with away, rotate, back up over the top, rotate underneath, like so. Attach it to your other loop. Make sure that those two loops are completely interlocked before you start to wrap, otherwise it's not going to hang nicely. It's going to hang wonkily. And then wrap, starting at the base of the loop all the way down till you reach the bead. Trim and if you feel like you're just chasing it, the end around and around, switch your grip so that you're holding the loop instead of the bead, and that's going to hold your pin steady while you tuck. Alright, so that's one earring almost done. Just needs an ear wire. I'm going to go do my second earring. By the way, I'm using 26 gauge gold-filled head pins. Here you can use 24 gauge. Just, pick whatever you have that fits through your bead. With the way metal prices keep skyrocketing, 26 gauge pins are cheaper than 24 gauge pins. But sometimes they're not as sturdy as you need for your project. In this particular project, these drops are not really gonna get much wear and tear at all. They're only have to basically hold themselves. So the 26 gauge pins are just fine. Okay, there's one pearl on that, and I've got my last pearl. Here's my lady with the scarf, and I have one loop remaining that needs to be pearlified. So we're going to pop that in there. And here's another trick. If you have trouble getting your chain nose pliers in there to hold it, you can hold with your round nose, but you've got to be really gentle because your round nose can basically punch a hole through your wires. So if you're gonna hold with your round nose, because the tips are significantly smaller than most pairs of chain nose, just make sure you don't squeeze too hard. Alright, so trim and tuck your end in. And then last thing I need to do to make a functional pair of earrings is add ear wires. So I'm just going to take my ear wire. Most ear wires, as we already know, open. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm going to twist it open. I'm going to drop my component on. I'm going to put the flashier side to the front. And then when I close this, I'm going to make sure that I close it completely so that there's no airspace between the end of the wire and the rest of the ear wire. Why, thank you, Corvus. They kind of do. Open. God, I don't know which side of this one is prettier. actually be that side. And then again, make sure you close it all the way. And any last minute adjustments. And there we go. Ta-da! Coiled wire chandelier earrings. If you want to refine the technique a little bit, you can make these loops even smaller than I did, because you really only need enough to carry your wire. You could use a decorative ear wire, and again, there are lots of ideas for this component that aren't necessarily earrings. Maybe I will add one of those into a future tutorial as well. So thank you all so much for hanging out with me on the Wednesday night tutorial stream for our coiled wire chandelier earrings with the Winky Labradorite just for Corvus. So I'm Allison from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. We will be back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream, in just half an hour, around 7:40, 7:45, with a live merchandise sale. Now we've bumped our our white tie sale to Saturday because I've misplaced my tiara. I'm not even joking about that. So it's a business casual sale tonight, but we are doing 8-inch gemstone strands. We got a nice brand new trunk show-in of 8-inch gemstone strands. The prices are fantastic. So that's what's going to be on the sale tonight. Thanks, Freedom. And I will be doing a little bit of individual merchandise as well, including a live labradorite. No, it's just labradorite. It's a mineral. It was never alive. So
It just looks like it.
it just looks like it, exactly. So, all right, so it's time for Heather and I to go do closing stuff and go retrieve our vehicles from remote parking, and we'll be back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream, in half an hour with the sale. If you're not going to join us for the sale, thanks for joining us for the tutorial. We'll be back tomorrow at noon on this same channel with our Ray of Sunshine ring. So that tutorial is going to be tomorrow at noon on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream. So if we don't see you later tonight, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow, or excuse me, on a future tutorial. So everyone take care. Hopefully I'll see y'all in half an hour. If not, have a great night, and we'll see you soon.